Hi guys, welcome back to today's vlog. It's Phil and Jen in the Philippines. Phil here. Today's video vlog is about safety in the Philippines and is it dangerous and this type of thing. I'm going to go over a little bit of history that will be able to give you some background as to why the Philippines are as they are. And all this is there's a basic bit of fact that I'm going to tell you, and how I perceived the place when I came back 9 years ago, and why things happen the way they do here. Enough of that anyway. The first thing that you'll notice about the Philippines when you get off, and you should be aware of, is the proliferation of men in uniform. The Filipinos, like most Asians, have this thing about people in positions of authority must have a uniform on, or the people won't recognize that they are in that position of authority. And they do have, like in Thailand and like in Vietnam and other places like that, a proliferation of people in uniforms undertaking different tasks. And probably the one you will see the most in your travels to the Philippines is the security guard. Now, the security guard will be dressed in a paramilitary type uniform. They're usually dressed in white shirts, and I'll display photos in the corners as we go through the different organisations, so it gives you a visual idea of what to look for. Security guards, they are usually on almost every commercial premises, and there's either one or half a dozen or however many they think they should have there, and they usually take up post at the front door. 9 times out of 10 they're armed with a shotgun, but don't be surprised if we see an AK-47 at the front door, and they usually screen people as they go into the premises. You may be required to go through a metal detector. They may have their magic wand, a small stick approximately 12 inches long. You're expected to open up any carry bag and they'll prod through that to make sure that there's no hidden devices or weapons. Another interesting thing is, on a lot of buildings here, it will give you an indication as not to take your firearms inside. Firearms are a different thing altogether. I have read articles whereas the Philippines is a country that has the 6th greatest amount of handguns, either manufactured or owned or in possession thereof, of anywhere in the world. And until you actually get here and realise that every second person has a handgun, whether on their persons or hidden in their nipper huts or something, you don't realise what the proliferation of weapons in this country is, ranging, and of course they have their favourites from 9mm to 45s. The Philippines is also licensed by US companies, a number of US companies, to produce handguns in this country. Colt, Smith & Wesson, I believe, but mainly Colts, and they produce a lot of 911s, and for our American viewers, they would know what I'm talking about. The Australians and the New Zealanders and Europeans who aren't as familiar with weapons wouldn't know, but you can look at all these things up. Why is there such a proliferation of weapons? Well, I suppose it goes back to a couple of things. American occupation for a period of time. We all know, I believe it's the Second Amendment, I could be incorrect, the right to bear arms. The Americans have a love affair with handguns and with weapons themselves, and all power to them. It's not something I agree with, but on the same token too, I'm not an American, I don't know the situation, but they do have a love affair with guns. They produce probably more guns of different varieties than anywhere else in the world. And when they occupied the Philippines, both before and after the war, they obviously brought that love with them, and that love of weapons probably was observed by the local population, and of course, they looked up to the Americans, and they gathered weapons. And the Second World War came along, and the Japanese occupied, and when they were eventually defeated, and remember this, the whole time the Japanese were in the Philippines, there was an active resistance in the Philippines, and as resistance fighters. They acquired guns. I believe the Americans dropped guns to them behind lines from the air. And of course, there was this huge amount of weaponry in the Philippines during occupation, and eventually the Japanese were defeated, and they left this horrendous amount, or this huge cache of weapons behind, and of course they were absorbed into the population. And then we had different conflicts here and there, which allowed the populace to carry weapons. But as with the Americans, and remember this, they were considered at one stage of the game to become part of the US under a protectorate system, or even though there was some banter of them becoming a state of the US, and the Second Amendment rights would have come into being there. So we have this huge cache of legal and illegal weapons in the Philippines, and those weapons are used for numerous things, from crime to sport and recreation to insurgencies, a number of things. But we're getting back to a safety situation. Let's go back now and talk about the guards. The guards that are found everywhere in every commercial premises screen people going in and out, and they hold a dual role in most of these places. They're also the people to ask if you require any information about the store or any directions. The best people to ask are usually security guards, because they stand in front of the building all day and they're quite happy to converse with you. So don't be afraid to go up and talk to them. But one thing I will say, even though they're security guards, or rent-a-cops as we probably know them, they do take their job very, very seriously. Now, I know Westerners have a tendency to be a little bit Karenish when they're confronted by people that they think, well, you know, 5 minutes ago you were coming out of a nipper hut with a dirt floor, and now all of a sudden you think you have an authority over me. Do not get involved in an argument with a security guard, because if it escalates and you're going off your brain because he is being pedantic, or you consider it to be pedantic, or he's not allowing you to do something, and it does escalate and you cause a public scene, and eventually he takes it the wrong way because they don't like losing face, and a kerfuffle of some description takes place, you will come off second best. And in this country, if the police are involved after an assault or something to that effect, and you find yourself in custody, you are in a lot of trouble. When I say you're in a lot of trouble, inconvenience to say the least, because the legal system here is very, very slow. If you find yourself incarcerated, it's a whole different story. Incarceration over here, you go on remand, waiting for your court case to come up. Now, it could be something as simple as assault or a fray or something to that effect. It just opens a Pandora's box of problems, because unless you can make bail, and they allow you to make bail, you could be waiting 6 months to a year just to face court, and you don't want to be in custody over some minor thing where you shot your mouth off and got carried away. And whether the security guard becomes physical with you, which I very much doubt unless you're a real prick, or you become physical with the security guard, you are going to come off second best. So don't be alarmed at the security guards. Treat them with a certain amount of respect. They do ridiculous things like stop you from going into a building through the wrong door, because that happens to be the exit door rather than the entrance door, and they'll direct you here. They take their jobs very seriously, but they're the ones you're going to run into most of all. Then, of course, you've got the police. And again, I'll show a photo up the top. Take note of the uniform. They're usually in blue uniforms, or fatigues with police written on them, military fatigues. Now, the police act in a totally different way in this country than we're used to in the United States or Australia or Europe. Their ability to investigate is totally different. Their whole function is not as what you would expect. So avoid the police at all costs. Having said that, the police are very polite. They to a certain degree are to be taken notice of. Don't try to argue with them on a point of law, whether it be common law or what you think the law is over here, because the unfortunate thing is in my experience, the police aren't well versed in the law, and they go more on emotion, and they will do an arrest, or they will take you into custody more on how you act than what the laws are, and they figure it out what they're going to do with you at a later date. So try to avoid that at all costs, getting any form of trouble here in the Philippines in regard to police. Take their directions, don't try to argue with them, just do what they say. Having said that, compared to, they're very approachable, they smile, again they're very polite, and I find the Filipino police, the PNP, is far more approachable than, say for instance, the Thai police. The Thai police, even though again they're not huge people, they have this aura about them which is an aura of dread. If you talk to a Thai policeman and he wants to take it further, it's a terrible thing. Now, just getting back to custody quickly, everyone knows about the Bangkok Hilton, and if you're unlucky enough to find yourself in the Bangkok Hilton, that's a terrible thing. It's not a great jail, but let me tell you, after seeing a number of prisons in the Philippines, I would rather be at the Bangkok Hilton if I had to serve any time in an Asian prison, or at least in those two countries, than I would serving in Cotabato prison or something to that effect. I believe a prison like Cotabato prison, which is the main prison in the southern part of the Philippines, is considered to be one of the worst jails for facilities and overcrowding in the world. So do not get yourself involved as far as that's concerned. Do not find yourself in custody in a place like Cotabato prison. Most of the time, if you are unlucky enough to be held in custody, you'll be held at a police station in cells there. But you also must be aware, if anything like this does happen, whether it be right, wrong or indifferent, and you find yourself in that situation, from day one you're going to have to pay money for food and things like that. It's not up to most of the jailers, especially in the province, to feed you and whatever, so you've got to have someone on the outside that will either provide you with money or food or the basic necessities coming to you. And if you're in the southern part of the Philippines in Mindanao and you find yourself in custody, it's very, very difficult to get consular assistance in Mindanao. Mainly because, and I'll talk about Australia, Mindanao really is a no-go zone as far as the Australian government is concerned. Now it's a bit of a blanket policy, and there's no real requirement for the boogeyman thing of don't go to Mindanao, because Mindanao is relatively safe in certain areas. But it's difficult to get consulate help anywhere outside of the major centres such as Cebu and Manila. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, the third people that you look out for are what we call traffic enforcers here. Now, traffic enforcers, another photo, can be dressed in uniform, traffic enforcers uniform, or they can have it on, blue shirts with the word traffic enforcer on it, or pullovers. Just look for an official looking guy. They usually have a sling bag over their shoulders which they keep their tickets and this type of thing in. They're usually most active during peak hours in the morning and the afternoon, but they also set up roadblocks and road traps. Having said that about the traffic wardens as we know them, having said that, they mainly concentrate on Filipino nationals, and if you're driving a car, it's very rarely that you'll get stopped being a Westerner driving a car. But if you happen to be on a scooter, and even though the vast population will be not riding with helmets, and you happen not to have a helmet on, pounds to peanuts, they will fine you rather than the 50 people that have overtaken you while he's writing the ticket out, because one, they know you can afford to pay it, and as an example. The other idiosyncrasies that I find here, and I use that word a lot, I'll have to get out of that, but the quirky things that I find here in certain built-up populations, such as, say for instance, inner city Dumaguete, in the city area itself, you're not allowed to ride a motorcycle unless you have a long pair of pants on, closed-in shoes and a helmet. Whereas Anywhere else, you can wander along in a pair of shorts and thongs or sandals and this type of thing. Yeah, it's highly unlikely you'll be pulled over, but you know, it is an offence and you will get fined. The fines aren't big, the inconvenience is more the thing. Okay, so you've got traffic enforcers. The third thing, or the fourth, I'm sorry, again, up here, are barangay police. Now, barangay police they're a paramilitary, pseudo police force, which are appointed by barangay captains in their municipal area, and they are police officers within that barangay, and the jurisdiction is only within that barangay, and they are there to enforce bylaws held within the barangay and decisions barangay captains make within that barangay. But you can run foul of them as well, again because they have what they consider to be a pseudo uniform on. They take their authority from God itself, more than likely, because if you ask for things like where's the legislation, where's this and where's that, they won't have it. It's the barangay told me so. Now, we all know how flexible that told me so can be. So again, any person in a position of authority, better to bite your tongue and avoid any form of confrontation, because the laws here are very spurious. They're very fluid and they vary from place to place. Now then you have the army, the PNP, again, the Philippines National Police. Now they're in charge of normal army activities. They're brought out for, and then they take on a policing role for terrorist events, and they man checkpoints, mainly in the south where the Muslim enclave is. I'll just show you a map of the Muslim enclave in Mindanao. Give you some indication of areas in Mindanao, which I consider basically, unless you have been in this country for a while and you know how things work, and you're a confident Asian traveller, avoid the Muslim enclave areas. Now, I know there'll probably be guys out there that know guys that marry Muslim girls and whatever, and I'm not suggesting it's a bad thing, the area, but it is highly political, and you just don't need the aggravation, so avoid the Muslim areas. Now, that map that I just showed you, the one up here, the disputed areas, or the Muslim enclave, they're trying to, and have always tried to, expand that enclave area, and it actually goes beyond those borders that is marked on the map and actually travels further south down to the coast where they're disputing the area, and it is still considered to be a Muslim area. Now, the Muslim population of the Philippines is about between 7 and 10% of the population, and the ongoing problems they have is simply because the Muslims believe, or a number of Muslims believe, that they should have jurisdiction over at least the entire island of Mindanao. And I'll give you a little bit of history in regard to that, just quickly. I know it's getting off the subject, but it'll give you a little bit of background. You've got to remember that rather than take sides, and I'm not taking sides anywhere, but the Philippines originally, a few thousand years ago, was populated mainly by people from the Pacific area, coming from the Pacific side, but the majority of people in the south, and it drifted up through the entire Philippines, came from Malaysia, Borneo way, and it was a divided sultanate. In as far as they had sultans here, they had, I suppose, the equivalent of pashas or whatever, and it was a Muslim country, or a majority Muslim populated country. And then, of course, the Spanish came, and they were here for 400 years, and they managed to convert the majority of the population over. But in the south, which is closer to other Muslim countries, they remained strict Muslim. And of course, as we know, with Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, it caused conflict, and that conflict has been going on since basically the time of the Spanish and when the Spanish converted. However, having said that, I'm not taking sides, but the reality of life is that when you have a population of 105 million people, and the majority of them are now Catholic Christians, or a combination of both, and it is a republic and a democracy, and where the majority of people rule as far as the overall governing body is concerned. They've decided that it's a Catholic country, and unfortunately the Muslims have to reside and live under that rule. But it causes conflict. We'll get into that conflict, which falls into the areas, is the Philippines safe, at a later time. Crime, I think I covered most of the, and of course, as I said, the army. Well, I did say the army. So I've covered most of the uniforms you're going to run into on a day-to-day basis, but there is a proliferation of different uniforms. The rule of thumb is if they're wearing a uniform, just avoid them, be polite. They just have such a myriad of different military and paramilitary uniforms over here. Better to be safe than sorry. The crime element over here, of course, like every large city and every city in Asia, and even now to places like Singapore and Japan, there are certain areas which, due to poverty, not so much in Tokyo and whatever, but in Southeast Asia, crime is a concern. But as with Los Angeles, and as with parts of London, and as with parts of Sydney, there are crime areas due to poverty and financial considerations that, under normal circumstances, we don't go into. So the same rule applies here. If it's not a good area, don't go into it. Don't think simply because you're a lot bigger than these guys, you can wander around with your jewelry flexing and your fanny pack hanging out. You're not going to run into trouble because you are. So avoid areas, and the way to do that, doesn't matter where you are, there'll be one of these areas. Listen to the locals, take heed. Just don't go into those areas. But to say, is the Philippines a dangerous area is ridiculous. No more dangerous as long as you keep common sense than anywhere else you'll travel in the world. So no, I don't think it is. But be aware that there is crime here. If you open yourself up to crime, you're going to be a victim of crime, and avoid it. And avoid the areas. Don't think you're bigger than Ben-Hur simply because these people aren't large in stature. Remember that in the back pocket of most of these people, or at easy access, they have a gun, and in crime areas they are not afraid to use them. So let's go back, and I don't want to talk politics, but you must be aware of it if you travel. And I know a lot of vloggers won't even touch it because they think it's totally negative. But knowing the situation, as I've explained to you, that the Muslims believe they have a claim, and of course the majority of the population want to go one way and the Muslims want to go another way. We all know the internal political conflicts when you have two groups of people that have opposing ideas. So we won't even go into who's right and who's wrong, because I don't think I can see both sides of the story. But the other thing you have down here are groups, infiltrated groups into this country, which support not only the Muslim side of things, but political sides as well. And those organisations are organisations like Abu Sayyaf, which everyone will know is a terrorist organisation in the Middle East and through a number of Muslim-based countries. They do have a presence here. They have an active army hidden in the hills and collaborators within the Muslim population, and they abide by the situation of jihad, and they actively pursue that, and they are in constant conflict with the local army, mainly in the south, in and around Mindanao, of which Mindanao has been in different forms of martial law for about 20 to 30 years, maybe even longer. I know for a fact it's over 20 years, but martial law has been in effect in Mindanao, and you will see checkpoints, and you'll see unrest from time to time. That unrest, unless you put yourself in a situation, should not affect you. Keep your nose out of politics here. Do not side with anyone, and just go about your business. Do not talk politics here, and that goes for, I'm talking mainly in the south, you don't know who you're talking to. The next group that causes a bit of a problem down here, which is probably in population or numbers greater than Abu Sayyaf, which again is an armed faction here, is the MPA, the New People's Army. Have a look up there. They're a guerrilla organisation which is communist-backed, and they take up armed conflict in Mindanao again and in other parts of the Philippines. They are responsible for bombings, and that's the reason, you know, a lot of the corporate side of things have inspections before you go into buildings, and that's why they often look underneath your car to see if there's no explosive devices, and that's why they also have checkpoints. Now, they flare up from time to time, and it's ridiculous saying that they don't, because they do, and but it's usually in isolated areas, but they are a presence. So if you wander off, again, we're talking about the south mainly, where they're mainly concentrated, although there is activity throughout central Philippines and up to the north in a far lesser numbers. But in the south, again, in Mindanao and its adjacent islands, the MPA is active. Now, the reason I say don't bring up politics, don't even talk about the MPA, is because your gardener may be a member. It harkens back to the Vietnam War and that type of warfare, where a lot of the Viet Cong, which were the paramilitary arm of the North Vietnamese army, you know, were hidden in plain sight. It's the same here, so don't get involved in that. Don't mention it, just be aware of it. Then we have MILF, again in the southern areas, which is the Moro Independent Army, which again, that's a symbol for them. And they were involved with recent war, one could say, in Marawi. You probably heard about it on the, and I'll show you some photos of Marawi where a group of brothers decided to get the Moro together and attempted jihad. Marawi is in the Muslim enclave. They attempted to take over the city and influence all the law-abiding Muslims to join, and this was going to be the caliphate, or this is going to be the war to start the war of independence within Mindanao. Well, that was stifled, and it was a full military action. Hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, were killed. Marawi was it was a mini war, and a lot of people don't realise that the Philippines Army and Air Force were involved. They bombed the place, aerial bombing. It was a siege for a long, long time. They shut down Mindanao again. It was very difficult to move around. We were over here at the time. The inspections at checkpoints, not so much for Westerners, because obviously we're not, we don't look like terrorists, so we didn't have a hard time, but people were inspected, and they were tracking down the leaders of this coup, for want of a better word, and you know, serve them their just desserts. Whether it be right, wrong, or difference, whether or not you think that they have a noble cause, not up to me. I'm just making you aware that this situation is going on in certain areas in the Philippines. It doesn't really affect the day-to-day workings of a Westerner over here, but take it from me, Mindanao has some great cities like Davao and whatever, and a lot of girls online dating sites are from Mindanao, because it is a rather poorer area of the Philippines, so they look to getting out of that by striking up relationships with Westerners, and they're proud of their towns, their countries and whatever, and they won't bring it up, but it is dangerous. I remember when I first got to the Philippines, and when I went to General Santos, from General Santos to get to the province, they wouldn't allow us to go out into the province, which happened to be 4 or 5 or 6 kilometres from the disputed area where we lived, unless we went in a convoy, and the convoy was supported. Now this was eight or 9 years ago, I can't remember when, and there was a full military mini tank at the front, and there was a group of army guys at the back, and we went in convoy. So that's how dangerous it was, or perceived to be, at that particular time. It's now, you rarely see any of that situation, but it does flare up from time to time, and you must be aware of it. Try to minimise in the south travelling at night, apart from the fact it's very dangerous through lack of street lights, and God knows what you'll hit from goats to human beings. They're not the best of roads. They're always ripping the roads up. They don't have warning signs, so just avoid travelling at night unless you're with a bus or a professional driver. So that's that. But as far as danger is concerned, if you keep your head, if you don't do anything stupid, if you're not offensive to anybody, if you don't get into arguments, if you don't borrow money, and all the normal things, the Philippines is as safe as anywhere in the world. Now let's go to the more popular areas in the Philippines, such as the islands and you know, where the resorts are and whatever. Very, very safe area. You're going to have minor crime, you're going to have pickpockets and whatever, but you're not going to run into a situation of the more adventurous of us travellers, the thick and stupid ones that wander to places where they shouldn't really be, and if they do find themselves in those places, you know, take care, keep your head screwed on and whatever. Now, if you are residing in these places or decide to reside outside of major cities like General Santos and Davao and whatever, if you're in the provinces and there are activity, remember this, even though there is a proliferation of guns, and once you're there you realise every second person is carrying one, it is illegal for a Westerner to have a gun in the Philippines. However, it is not illegal for your wife or girlfriend to own one, and I'll leave it at that. So take steps, do not brandish things. If you are caught with a gun over here, you will more than likely go to jail, so don't get caught with one. Unless you're married and residing here permanently, I believe there is a way to obtain a weapon, but you know, it's totally up to you, and it shouldn't affect most of you, because you should be coming to a place like Dumaguete, or you should be coming to a place, you know, that has expats and is safe. As an example of that, because people say, oh, the Philippines this, and he's making all these things, so it is dangerous, and it isn't dangerous. Remember this, the Philippines is made up of 7,641 islands. There's 174, give or take, languages spoken in this particular country. Because of the divisions, and because of the languages, and because of the cultures, one could really consider that the Philippines is, say for instance, 174 different countries. You know, now you can be in Europe and travel over the water, as you do with island countries or such, and you can be from one side of the Mediterranean to the other and have armed conflict, and you can be on the right side and never see any form of armed conflict at all. Consider that as with the Philippines. Simply because the country is known as the Philippines doesn't mean, one, ethnically it's all the same, language-wise it's all the same, you know, political strife is all the same, crime is all the same. It's as different as chalk and cheese in different areas. So do your research when you come to the Philippines. Go to the areas that, you know, expats congregate at. Go to the beautiful areas in the Philippines. If you're forced, for want of a better word, to go to areas which aren't as what we would consider to be as safe as other areas, take precautionary measures. Do not get involved in politics and whatever. I think that's about it as far as safety is concerned, and the political situation and whatever here. Remember, the Philippines is a relatively new country. When I say it's a new country, the Philippines became independent in 1899 and then proceeded with a war against the United States until 1902. So a lot of people don't know there was a war against the United States up until 1902. And then, of course, occupation by the United States took place, and then occupation by the Japanese took place. But they didn't gain independence. They're a new country until 1946. Not a great deal of time ago. And they have their teething problems. And just organising a country that is so diversified as the Philippines is a difficult job, especially for a country that's only been really in existence in its present form since 1946. So keep that in mind. Make allowances. They're trying their hardest. but it's a difficult job. You know, you've only got to look at the problems, for want of a better word, that the United States is having between Republicans and Democrats at this time. I don't want to get involved in who's right and who's wrong, but the difference of opinion between two groups of people in the United States, or you go to Ireland and the Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. So these conflicts take place in what we perceive to be countries all the time. Do not just whitewash the Philippines and say, oh, it's a dangerous place. It's as dangerous as you let it be. Anyway, that's about as much as I can think of at the moment off the top of my head. If you have any questions, just in the comments. Again, subscribe. I'm having a great time. Comment. I'll always answer your comments. I haven't got enough comments to not answer everybody's. So I believe I'm answering everyone as best I can. I'm only too happy to assist in any way I can. So it's Phil here from Phil and Jen in the Philippines. Subscribe, hit the bell, thumbs up, thumbs down, leave me suggestions. Have a great day. I look forward to seeing you in the next vlog. Cheers for now.